ahead and show us some of the things we collected in the seine.
Sure. One of the things we collected in the seine was a staghorn sculpin. It just feeds on the bottom. Another one we caught was a sole, and when it wants to catch its prey, it rustles up the dirt and it clouds them and attacks. And this is a saddleback gunnel. Sorry. Another one of these is another sculpin. If you can see, it's bright green and it blends in with the kelp. So that's another one of them.
As you can see, a lot of these organisms that we found, they live in either the algae and seagrass areas or they live in the mudflats. They're all kind of adapted to living on the bottom. Another area that we have here in the bay is an intertidal area called Three Graces, and we went out earlier and collected some organisms that we want to show you that live in this environment. It's a little bit different. It's a rocky area that is exposed during low tide and inundated during high tide, so underwater part of the time but exposed part of the time. And those organisms have had to adapt to that type of environment, and so they're a little bit different than what we find in the mudflat eelgrass areas. This is Brittany and Tucker. They're going to help us identify some of these organisms. Tucker, do you know what this is?
A sea star.
Sea star, very good. And what is something interesting about a sea star?
If something happens to it that makes the arm go off or something, it can grow back.
Right, they have the ability to regenerate limbs if need be. Other organisms we have in here. Do you know what this is, Brittany?
Sea anemone.
That's a sea anemone, right. Do you know something interesting about a sea anemone? How do they feed? Do you know, Tucker?
They paralyze the prey with its tentacles.
Right, they have these stinging cells on their tentacles that they're able to feed any organisms that happen to swim by and touch their tentacles. Other things we have, filter feeders such as, do you know what these are?
Barnacles.
Barnacles growing on top of?
Mollusks. Mussels.
Mussels, right. They are a type of mollusk, and both of these organisms are filter feeders. They start out their lives as plankton, which we talked about a little bit earlier, but actually settle out and become, as adults, filter feeder of plankton themselves. We also have some larger free-swimming fish that we find here in the estuary. We don't generally find them in either of these environments. They may visit them a little bit. And they are what we have over here in the coolers. Tucker, do you know what I'm talking about? Some large fish that both fishermen and lots of larger animals like?
Salmon.
Salmon, that's right. This is Skylar, and he's going to tell us a little bit about this particular type of salmon.
This is a female Chinook salmon, and it basically lives in the river. Then it comes down into the estuary where it's mixed with salt and fresh water, so it gets used to it. Then goes out in the ocean for about 4 years, then comes back through the estuary to its river that it was born in, spawns, and then dies.
That's right. Let me see if I can get this out of the water so you can get a better look. Okay, this is the largest salmon that we find here in Oregon. This is not by any means the largest size that it can attain. These fish can grow to be about 129 pounds. The largest ones we generally see here in the estuary in this area are probably 40 to 50 pounders. Over here in another cooler, we have a different species of salmon. Natasha, you want to tell us what we have here?
Yes, we have the male coho, also known as a silver. They spend about a year in the rivers, and then they go out to the ocean in the estuary, and then they come back in and spawn in the fall, and that's their only spawning time.
That's right. These guys don't get nearly as big as the Chinook salmon do. They can reach 20 pounds or so. Most of the ones we find, though, are generally 8 to 12 pounds that come into the area here. So, anybody know what some of the things, besides fishermen, besides us, that like the salmon, what are some of the animals that are feeding on these adults as they come back into the estuary? As they come back into the estuary and try to work their way up to the rivers to spawn. What are some of the animals? Seals, right. Seals and sea lions can sometimes be a problem. They get into conflicts with the fishermen when the fishermen are catching them and reeling them in, and all of a sudden a seal or sea lion comes and tries to steal the fish away from them.
Speaking of seals, I have some for you to put here on the board along with other organisms. Tucker and Brittany, could you help me put these on here? As you can see, we have built our food web so much from the beginning. We talked about animals that live in the mudflats, the clams and the worms, and we talked about different kinds of crabs, tide pool animals, and fishermen, of course. And I just want to thank all of you so much for being here with us as we learned about all of these.